You wake up at 3 a.m. and the silence is deafening. Your phone sits on the nightstand, and for a split second, you think about reaching for it, about texting him even though you know you shouldn't. But the alternative, that vast emptiness of just being with yourself in the dark, feels unbearable. So your hand moves toward the phone. This isn't about love. This isn't even about him. This is about something far more primal, something Carl Jung spent his entire life trying to help us understand. The fear of being alone isn't what you think it is. It's not about loneliness or needing companionship. It's about what happens when you're forced to face the parts of yourself you've been running from your entire life. And the men in your life have been using this fear against you in ways so subtle you've probably never even noticed. Jung called it the shadow, and before you think this is going to be some abstract philosophical discussion, understand that the shadow is the most practical, tangible force in your relationship life. It's every part of you that you've deemed unacceptable, every emotion you've suppressed, every desire you've denied. And here's what nobody tells you about the shadow. It doesn't disappear when you ignore it. It grows stronger, more demanding, more desperate for attention. And it will do whatever it takes to be seen, even if that means sabotaging every good thing in your life. When you're alone, truly alone, the shadow has nowhere to hide. There's no relationship drama to distract you, no text messages to obsess over, no one else's needs to prioritize above your own. It's just you and all those parts of yourself you've spent years trying to avoid. That's the real reason being alone feels terrifying. Not because you need someone else to complete you, but because you're afraid of what you'll find when you finally meet yourself without the buffer of another person's presence. Think about the last time you were in a relationship that you knew, deep down, wasn't good for you. Maybe he was emotionally unavailable. Maybe he was manipulative. Maybe he was just profoundly wrong for you in ways that were obvious to everyone except you. But you stayed. You stayed long past the expiration date, long past the point where staying made any logical sense. And here's what Jung would tell you. You stayed because being in that relationship, even a bad one, allowed you to project all your shadow material onto him. Every time you were angry at him for being emotionally distant, you didn't have to acknowledge your own fear of intimacy. Every time you blamed him for the relationship's problems, you didn't have to look at your own patterns of self-sabotage. He became a convenient screen onto which you could project everything you didn't want to see in yourself, and when you're alone, that screen disappears. Suddenly, all that material you've been projecting outward has nowhere to go except back to you. This is where it gets really interesting, because the men who are most skilled at keeping you hooked, the ones who seem to have an almost supernatural ability to keep you coming back no matter how badly they treat you, they've figured out how to weaponize your relationship with your shadow. They sense that you're afraid of being alone, not because you need them specifically, but because you're running from yourself. And they use that fear as leverage. Every time you get close to leaving, they give you just enough attention, just enough hope, just enough drama to keep you engaged. Because as long as you're focused on them, as long as you're analyzing their behavior and trying to figure out what they're thinking, you're not looking at yourself. You're not doing the uncomfortable work of integration that Jung talked about. You're externalizing your internal struggle, and they benefit from keeping you in that state. Integration in Jungian terms is the process of bringing your shadow into consciousness, of acknowledging and accepting the parts of yourself you've rejected. It's not about becoming those rejected parts. It's about recognizing that those parts exist, understanding why they exist, and learning to work with them instead of against them. And here's the paradox that changes everything. The only way to stop fearing being alone is to be alone. Not forever, but long enough to do this work of integration. Long enough to sit with the discomfort. Long enough to meet your shadow without immediately reaching for a relationship to distract you from it. When you can do that, something remarkable happens. You start to discover that you're not actually as afraid of yourself as you thought you were. The parts of you that you've been running from, they're not monsters. They're just parts of you that need to be seen and acknowledged. Jung had this concept he called the animus, which is the masculine aspect within a woman's psyche. And the state of your animus directly affects the type of men you attract and the quality of your relationships. When your animus is undeveloped, you tend to project it outward onto the men in your life. You look for them to provide qualities like strength, decisiveness, logic, protection, qualities that you actually possess yourself but haven't learned to access. And this creates a dependent dynamic where you need them to be those things for you because you haven't cultivated those qualities within yourself. The fear of being alone is often really a fear of losing access to your own projected animus. You're afraid that without a man, you won't have access to masculine energy. But that's only true if you haven't integrated your animus, if you haven't recognized that those qualities exist within you. Here's how this plays out in real relationships. You meet a man who seems strong and confident. You're attracted to that strength because some part of you recognizes it as something you need to develop in yourself. But instead of using the relationship as a mirror, you become dependent on his strength. You start making him responsible for decisions you should make yourself. You defer to his judgment even when your own intuition is telling you something different. And then, when the relationship ends, you feel like you've lost a part of yourself. But you didn't lose a part of yourself. You never had it to begin with because you never integrated it. It was always his, always external to you, and that's why losing him feels so devastating. The manipulation that happens in relationships often exploits this exact dynamic. A manipulative man doesn't want you to integrate your animus. He doesn't want you to develop your own inner strength and autonomy because that would make you less controllable. So he does things that keep you dependent on him for those qualities. He makes decisions for you while framing it as protection. He undermines your confidence while positioning himself as the only one who truly believes in you. And all of this is designed to keep you afraid of being alone. Because if you're afraid of being alone, you won't leave. You won't set boundaries. You won't demand better treatment. You'll accept breadcrumbs and call it love because the alternative, facing yourself without him as a buffer, feels impossible. Jung believed that the process of individuation, of becoming a whole and authentic person, requires solitude. Not permanent isolation, but regular periods of being alone with yourself. In our culture, especially for women, there's immense pressure to be constantly connected, constantly available, constantly in relationship. Being alone is treated as something to be fixed. But what if being alone is actually the most important work you can do? What if the fear of being alone is really the fear of becoming who you actually are, rather than who you've been conditioned to be? What if every moment you spend running from solitude is a moment you're postponing your own liberation? The work of facing your shadow, of integrating your animus, this work happens in solitude. It can be supported by therapy, by trusted friends, but ultimately it's work you have to do alone. No one can do it for you. No relationship can do it for you. And until you do it, you'll keep repeating the same patterns. You'll keep finding yourself at 3 a.m., reaching for your phone. You'll keep staying too long with men who don't deserve you. You'll keep feeling like something is missing. But here's the truth that Jung spent his life trying to convey. You're already whole. The parts you think are missing, they're not missing. They're just hidden, repressed, pushed into shadow because you learned somewhere along the way that they weren't acceptable. And the journey isn't about finding someone to complete you. The journey is about retrieving those lost parts of yourself, about integrating them, about becoming conscious of the patterns that have been running your life from the shadows. Here's what happens when you do the work, when you face the fear and sit with the solitude and meet your shadow. You start to develop a relationship with yourself that's so solid that other people's behavior stops having the power to destabilize you. You start to see manipulation clearly because you're not desperate for the manipulator's attention. You start to set boundaries naturally because you're not afraid of the consequences. You start to choose partners who are actually good for you because you're no longer using relationships to avoid yourself. You stop fearing being alone because you've discovered that being alone is the foundation of everything else. It's not the end of the story. It's the beginning. It's where real intimacy becomes possible because you're no longer bringing your unintegrated shadow into every relationship and expecting your partner to manage it for you. So if you're watching this and you recognize yourself in these patterns, if you feel that uncomfortable twinge of recognition when I talk about fearing being alone or staying too long in relationships that don't serve you, take that recognition as an invitation. An invitation to stop running, to turn around and face what you've been avoiding. It won't be comfortable, but I promise you it will be worth it. And you don't have to do it perfectly. You just have to start. You just have to be willing to sit with yourself, to ask the hard questions, to notice the patterns without immediately trying to escape them. That's where transformation begins. If this resonated with you, if you felt something shift as you listened, do me a favor and hit that like button. It helps other women who need this message find it. And if you want to continue this journey of understanding the dark psychology of relationships, of learning to see the patterns that have been running your life and discovering how to transform them, subscribe to this channel. I'm here creating this content because I believe you deserve to understand what's really happening beneath the surface of your relationship struggles. So join me. Subscribe. Let's do this work together. You're not alone in this struggle. I'll see you in the next video.